History remembers the dreamers, the ones who looked at the world not for what it was, but for what it could become. But hidden between the lines of invention and progress lie stories of men who reached too far, men whose brilliance blinded them to the danger of their own creations. They built machines to save humanity, and died proving them. These are the inventors who were killed by their own genius. Before we dive into their unbelievable stories, take a second to subscribe. It helps us bring more forgotten moments of history back to life. Now, let's begin with Franz Reichelt. The Flying Tailor. The year was 1912. Paris, the beating heart of art, fashion, and invention. Airplanes were still novelties, fragile birds of wood and fabric, and every man with a sewing machine and imagination believed he could make mankind fly. Among them was a tailor named Franz Reichelt. Born in 1879 in what is now the Czech Republic, Reichelt had moved to France to chase his dream, to make a name for himself in the world's fashion capital. He was charming, a little eccentric, and fiercely proud of his craft. His clients admired his precision with fabric and needle. But Franz was never content with suits and dresses. He wanted something greater. He wanted to give humanity wings. A few years earlier, parachutes already existed for hot air balloons. But they were bulky and impractical. Reichelt imagined a new kind of design, one that could be worn. A parachute suit, as he called it, which could let an aviator leap from the skies and glide safely to the ground. At first, his workshop on Rue Gaillon was filled with laughter and enthusiasm. He stitched late into the night, testing fabrics, measuring weights, sketching drawings by candlelight. He tested prototypes using mannequins, dropping them from his apartment's fifth-floor window. Most of them crashed. But Reichelt insisted the failures were just data, proof that success was closer. By early 1912, he had designed a version he truly believed in, part overcoat, part parachute. Layers of silk and rubber, folded and pleated to open mid-fall like the wings of a bird. He requested permission from Parisian authorities to test his invention, and astonishingly, they granted it. The chosen site, the Eiffel Tower. Initially, Reichelt assured everyone he would test it using a dummy. But when the day came, February 4th, 1912, he had changed his mind. He told his friends and the police, "Greater than I am going to prove the worth of my invention myself." They begged him not to. He smiled. He was certain, utterly certain, that he would glide like a bird, land gently, and walk away a hero. Just after 8 a.m., the cameras rolled. In those rare surviving seconds of film, you can still see him, a small man wrapped in his heavy contraption, climbing the iron steps of the tower's first platform. A cold wind cut through the Paris morning. He stood at the edge, looking down at the crowd of journalists and curious onlookers below. For a brief moment, he hesitated. He crossed himself, and then he jumped. The parachute never opened. Witnesses said he fell like a stone, arms flailing, the heavy fabric fluttering uselessly behind him. He struck the frozen ground with a sound that silenced the crowd. He died instantly. The camera kept rolling, documenting not just the fall, but the end of a dream. The newspapers the next morning called him Le Tailleur Volant, the Flying Tailor. To some, a fool. To others, a martyr of invention. Even in death, his story lingered, a symbol of mankind's endless and often fatal desire to defy nature. But Franz wasn't the only dreamer swallowed by his own creation. Another man's brilliance would turn against him, not in the skies, but on the ground, amidst the roar of machines. William Bullock and the press that crushed its maker. Before social media, before radio, before television, there was the printed word. And one man made it faster than anyone before him. William Bullock, born in 1813 in Greenville, New York, was the kind of mechanic who could fix anything. He grew up during the rise of the Industrial Revolution, a time when machines were reshaping the world. At just 14, he was already building printing presses from scrap metal. By the time he was 40, he had transformed the industry. His rotary printing press, patented in 1863, could produce thousands of sheets per hour, far faster than any press before it. Newspapers could now print in massive quantities, making information accessible to millions. He became a hero among publishers and printers, but genius often walks hand in hand with obsession. Bullock was never satisfied. He was constantly tinkering, adjusting gears, improving feed mechanisms, optimizing rollers. In 1867, while overseeing the installation of one of his massive presses for the Philadelphia Public Ledger, he noticed a problem. A belt had come loose. Instead of stopping the machine, he tried to fix it while it ran. Witnesses say he reached down, trying to nudge the belt back into place. A loose bolt caught his clothing. In an instant, his leg was pulled into the massive rotating cylinders. He screamed, the sound drowned by the roar of the press. By the time workers shut it down, his bones were crushed and twisted beyond repair. They took him to the hospital, but infection soon set in. Days later, surgeons prepared to amputate his leg. But before they could finish the operation, William Bullock died, killed by the very machine that had made him famous. His death shocked the industrial world, yet the machine he built continued to run, printing news of his own demise. The invention that ended his life would go on to shape modern journalism. Every newspaper, every printed page that followed, carried a trace of the man who gave his body to the gears of progress. The next person on our list is Thomas Midgley, Jr., the man who poisoned himself and the world. If there is a name that perfectly embodies the double-edged sword of invention, it is Thomas Midgley, Jr. Born in 1889 in Pennsylvania, Midgley was the golden boy of American science. Brilliant, confident, and inventive. The kind of man industry loved. He worked under the famous inventor Charles F. Kettering at General Motors, where he helped tackle one of the biggest problems of early automobiles, engine knocking. It was Midgley who discovered that adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline would make engines run smoother. In 1921, GM introduced ethyl, the first leaded gasoline. Profits soared, and Midgley was hailed as a genius. But what no one yet understood was that lead, a deadly neurotoxin, was poisoning not just factory workers, but the world itself. Within months of production, workers at the refineries began to fall ill. Some died after violent seizures and hallucinations. Midgley himself suffered severe lead poisoning. He even staged a public demonstration to prove it was safe, washing his hands in tetraethyl lead and inhaling the fumes. He would later admit privately that he had taken a few months' leave of absence to get the lead out of my system. Yet his ambition didn't stop there. After gasoline, he turned to refrigeration. Early refrigerators used dangerous gases like ammonia and sulfur dioxide. Midgley wanted something safer, and he succeeded. He synthesized Freon, the first chlorofluorocarbon, CFC, which revolutionized cooling technology. But again, the hidden cost was staggering. CFCS would later be discovered to destroy the ozone layer, thinning Earth's shield against ultraviolet radiation. Midgley didn't live long enough to see the full consequences of his inventions, but fate ensured he would pay a personal price. In 1940, he contracted polio, which left him partially paralyzed. Ever the engineer, he designed an elaborate system of pulleys and ropes that could lift him from bed to wheelchair. On November 2, 1944, at the age of 55, Thomas Midgley, Jr. became entangled in his own mechanism. By the time anyone found him, he had been strangled by the ropes, killed by his final invention. It was a quiet, almost poetic irony. The man who had poisoned the atmosphere was himself suffocated by his own creation. To this day, his name is remembered with equal parts awe and caution, a warning about what happens when human brilliance forgets human responsibility. Horace Lawson Hunley, the submarine that became a tomb. The mid-19th century was an age of war and innovation. The American Civil War raged from 1861 to 1865, pitting brother against brother, and forcing both sides to seek new forms of warfare. In this chaos emerged Horace Lawson Hunley, a lawyer, planter, and inventor from Tennessee. He was fascinated by the idea of underwater travel, the power to strike from beneath the waves. Along with engineers James McClintock and Baxter Watson, Hunley developed a series of experimental submarines for the Confederate Navy. Their third design would make history, the H.L. Hunley, a 40-foot-long iron cylinder powered by 8 men turning hand cranks. Its mission, to sink Union ships blockading southern ports. Its weapon, a spar torpedo, a copper keg of explosives mounted on a pole extending from the bow. But the submarine was dangerous even to its own crew. In early tests, it had already sunk twice, killing men both times. Still, Hunley refused to give up. He believed his invention could turn the tide of war. On October 15, 1863, he decided to lead a final test himself. He and 8 volunteers climbed into the narrow, claustrophobic vessel. The hatch was sealed. The Hunley slipped beneath the dark waters of Charleston Harbor. They never resurfaced. When the sub was recovered days later, rescuers found all 9 men dead, seated neatly at their stations. There were no signs of panic. They had simply run out of air. Horace Hunley died alongside his crew, entombed within his own creation. Months later, the recovered submarine succeeded under a new crew, becoming the first in history to sink an enemy ship, the USS Housatonic. But it vanished immediately after, lost beneath the sea for over a century. When archaeologists finally raised the Hunley in 2000, they found the skeletons still seated, a haunting monument to Inventions' cost. Hunley's dream changed naval warfare forever, but his name is now remembered as a man who built not a weapon, but a coffin. Each of these men, Reichelt, Bullock, Midgley, Hunley, shared one fatal trait: belief. Belief that the impossible could be conquered. Belief that progress was worth any price. But history reminds us, progress is not a straight line. It's a battlefield of triumphs and tragedies. Reichelt's fall showed us the cost of defying gravity. Bullock's death warned us of machines that never sleep. Midgley's life became a parable of unintended consequence, and Hunley's tomb beneath the sea whispered that even visionaries can drown in their own dreams. They were not villains, they were not fools. They were men who loved the future so much they never made it there themselves. Progress always demands sacrifice. The question that remains is, how much are we willing to give for the sake of tomorrow?